The Observer's Calendar for October 2023 on episode 363 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up the night sky, and this podcast is for everybody who likes going out under the stars. So first, we have a bit of a thank you to Jim for his ongoing Patreon support and for sending us some details on the double shadow transit on Jupiter for October 19th/20. We'll get to that in a moment. And secondly, we have a couple upcoming solar eclipses, one on October 14th and one on April 8th. Any comments about those, Shane, before we get into this?
Yeah, the 14th, I believe is that just a partial, or is that the annular, or what is that one?
Yeah, so on October 14th, there's going to be an annular eclipse. Yeah. We'll talk more about that in this episode later on. And what that means is that the moon passes in front of the sun. But even for places that experience the moon completely passing in front of the sun, you don't get a total eclipse. It never 100% blocks out the sun. So you always need to be observing with a specialized solar filter. There's no point at which you can look at the sun without a solar filter. So for us, I think we get around like a 60% partial eclipse here. And so we were just chatting about maybe taking a look at that. And then on April 8th of 2024, there's a full solar eclipse on a path that extends from, I think it's like Mexico through the States, through southern Ontario, and then into the Atlantic provinces of Canada. So lots of opportunity for a lot of people to take a look at that one.
Yeah, and the one on the 8th, if you have any interest in seeing that eclipse, the total eclipse, make sure you're on the path of totality, but probably more important, book your accommodations if needed now, because anywhere along that path of totality will, if it's not already completely booked, it will be probably very soon. And the total eclipse that happened in 2017, we ended up staying about 2 hours away. I think it was close to a 2-hour drive to get to the path of totality. And you may have to do that, for this one too. So while we're focusing in on the objects here in October, it's worthwhile noting to start planning for that April event if you have any desire.
Yeah, I have relatives near the path. I may go to Atlantic Canada and just stay with one of them, and then I think it's like less than 40-minute drive to the path, and they're kind of off the beaten trail already. So I don't think it's going to be a spot that people are going to be traveling to, but just for the simple fact that I could do it on the cheap. That's what I might plan to do, just to see my cousin who does the show music for us. And yeah, so he's not too far from that path of totality. So yeah, nice. I might go that way. But for this one in October 14th, of course, since you can't even see a total eclipse, then you have to be observing. It would be cool to see the annular, but probably just stay here. And I ordered some solar safety glasses, and this just came out via the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. So I'm just going to do a plug for these if people want to get them, particularly if you're in Canada. This is a pretty good way to order them. They are pretty inexpensive. They are now available in packs of 1, 5, and 10, or I think you can even call them and get like a huge bulk order for your club if you want, from the RASC, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And these are glasses that have been sourced for their safety. And I've worked with staff in the past, and they've done a good job on getting really good ones. The website is secure.rasc.ca/store. So just secure, secure.rasc.ca/STORE. And their promo says, don't miss a single moment of the eclipse. Keep your eyes on the skies and safeguard your vision with our solar eclipse glasses. Our eclipse glasses are meticulously crafted with your safety in mind. They effectively filter out all harmful ultraviolet and infrared light, offering comprehensive eye protection by blocking an impressive 99.99999% of high-intensity visible light. So I ordered a pack of 5 this morning just for my own use, and I know that that they're absolutely the best solar safety glasses that you can get. They went to great lengths to procure the best ones, and the price was funny. So the glasses themselves hardly cost anything. I think it was $8 or $8 and change for five. So they're only like $1.50 each. But the shipping was a little bit more. So depending on how many you get, you could theoretically pay more for the shipping. But you're going to get them in time for October 14th. We're going to put this episode out tomorrow. So if you get this, you really want them for that partial eclipse on the 14th, then place your order. And if you're placing that order and buy the shipping, then you'll get them in time.
Yeah, and one other note, not only will the accommodations dry up for the total eclipse in April, but so will equipment. So if you do want to observe either the annular coming up or the total eclipse, because that path of totality is like right through the central kind of US and some real like high population areas, all sorts of filters and solar telescopes become sold out as you get closer to that actual date. Yeah. So again, if you have dreams or desires to observe it, not only should you plan your trip or your accommodations, but also make sure you have the equipment that you're going to need, because if you wait much longer, you might not be able to buy it very easily.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think I got to refresh my solar filter for this one. I'm just going to get some of these solar safety glasses. Maybe if you're around, you'll come out. Maybe Mike will come out on the morning of the 14th. It's around 9:00 in the morning for us here to observe it. I got a bunch of these glasses in case neighbors and that are around, and at least just be able to take a look at it. I've seen a few partials before. It's pretty cool to see. And then, but for that one in April, yeah, I plan to travel with my Takahashi. So. Yeah, should be good.
Nice.
How about you? Any plans?
For the April one?
Yes.
No plans yet. There's a good chance that I won't make any attempt to observe it, actually. If we go anywhere, I think it would be like maybe in that Montreal, sort of southern Ontario or southern Quebec area, and cross our fingers. But we have a couple other trips planned around that time that are non-astronomical, so it's probably hard to fit a third in there.
Yeah, we'll see. I just got to figure out a way to get to Moncton. So like the chances of seeing it there, I think, are low, but my chances of having an inexpensive trip are very high. So.
Well, you gotta take that balance, I guess.
Yeah. I just got to talk to Will and get him on board, but I think he should be. All right. Did you get any observing in this past week? Did you try your Teleview equalizer?
I did not. No. Oh. There wasn't really a point in putting it in the scope because I wasn't swapping between, heavy and light eyepieces. But really, it's just a 2-inch to 1.25-inch adapter that just happens to weigh a lot. So I'm sure it'll work fine. But I was observing some doubles on Thursday night using the Takahashi 76 DCU, and I had the 1.7 Q extender in it. And Chris, you're gonna, I know you're sitting down, which is good because I'm gonna shock you. I mono viewed for the first time in ages.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, like kind of my ultimate grab and go for at home. It's taken me a little while to get there. I'm still using the Stellarvue MC2 mount with the Nexus digital setting circles, but the 76 millimeter tack is so light, and I put it on a carbon fiber tripod because the Burlap one is fairly heavy, and it's just so easy to take in and out of the house. And my bino viewers don't work natively in that telescope. I need to use a Barlow. So instead of monkeying around with all of that, I just put my Leica aspheric zoom in there, which again sort of complements the grab and go concept because it's really one eyepiece that gives you a pretty big functional range. So yeah, I was in the backyard really just looking at a bunch of doubles, all of them off the RASC double star list that Blake Nancaro curated a little while ago. And I won't go through all of them. How many did I observe? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them in total in Andromeda and Cassiopeia. But there was 2 in Cassiopeia that were really, really nice that I'll maybe just key on here. Both of these are the SAO designations. So the first one is 21002. And it was just one of those wow kind of doubles. The double itself is in a pretty rich star field, but it really jumped out because the North Star was a real deep red. In fact, at first I thought, I wonder, if it's a carbon star. I don't believe it is after doing just a little bit of research after observing. But the companion to it is kind of a like a bluish white, and with that deep red star and then that bluish white star, it really, really was quite pretty to look at. And then the second one up there in Cassiopeia is 10937. This was the tightest pair that I observed the whole night, although still very easy to split. Both of the stars were pretty similar magnitudes, but there was one star at that time that was oriented to the north, and it was a real deep orange, whereas the companion was a kind of a lighter blue. But because the stars were so close to each other, the contrast of colors was more apparent. And those two were real fun. I enjoyed all of them, but those two were the highlights. I had a quick look at Saturn. I was interested in the Enceladus challenge that one of our listeners wrote in about, but unfortunately that night Enceladus was transiting the disk of Saturn, so there was no way I was going to see it. And seeing wasn't too wonderful that night, but I was able to get Titan, no problem. And then Rhea and Dione were visible during, those real brief microseconds of steady seeing. And then the other highlight that night was the ISS was making a pass, and I was able to hand track it and get 3 different views of it as it passed overhead. And because it moves so fast and because hand tracking is, not super accurate, I really couldn't get a real nice observation to, see how much detail I could see visually. But again, no problem to see those 2 side compartments or panels with that central kind of capsule or whatever it is where, I think the majority of those folks operate and live. So yeah, I always enjoy seeing the space station and trying to get it in a telescope if I have one out. So
nice.
Yeah, it was a fun session. How about you? Were you able to get out?
Yeah, I got out a few times. I was just casually observing Saturn and Jupiter on the Thursday and Friday evenings. And then I think it was Saturday morning, I got up and I was surprised it was clear. So grabbed my binoculars and went out and just was looking at like the Orion Nebula and the Belt of Orion and Lambda Orionis area and, just some of the other open clusters that are around. But Thursday night, the seeing wasn't as good and I was using too much power. I was using like 180 power, I think, or something like that. And then on Friday night, I dropped it down to around 120. And that was much better. I think the seeing was quite a bit better on Friday evening as well. And it wasn't as clear. There was a little bit of haze in that, but it doesn't matter. Moon's up and just looking at planets. And then, we could really see quite a bit of detail on the disk of Saturn. We could see like the tonal differences of the rings. We could see the ring gap. We could see the shadow of the planet being sort of projected onto the backside of the rings was pretty cool. We could see banding on the planet Saturn, so that's something you can't always pick up, and some of the other details. I think in the North Polar region, and start to see some of that structure from the big storm that's up there. So that was pretty good, just for 120 power. And then
that's really good. I was able to tease out some of the cloud bands on Thursday night, but that was it. A little bit limited by aperture, but the seeing was just not that great for me.
Yeah. Thursday wasn't nearly as good. I was using the 100 millimeter Takahashi in both instances, and on Thursday, we could see the bands, the 2 equatorial bands on Jupiter on Thursday. And the odd time you get some hints of some other banding, but then on Friday, you could trace banding all the way down to the polar regions. Again, quite a ton of detail. Yeah, I think like in total I was looking at I think I kind of like 16 or 18 features, some barges and that sort of thing. And I was just standing and just was set up sort of pretty sketchily on my deck, just for one reason or another. And it was just for convenience sake, really, because I didn't want to go and plunk the telescope down in the lawn or on the road or whatever, just because I was just looking forward to just having a quick view. But yeah, those conditions are really good. I kind of almost even thought about moving the telescope, but yeah, I just decided to do it like that and have a little bit of fun, just poking around the sky a little bit too. Yeah, it was really nice and very pleasant. Evenings wasn't very cold or anything. I did try to see a few other things, but yeah, with the moon being so bright, it's just not that great. Had a couple neighbors walking up the road, and I'd been telling this neighbor about the observatory, and just like in passing, and then he's been sort of eagerly sort of following along as he goes for walks with his kids. And then he and one of his kids came up, and I gave them a bit of a show of Jupiter and Saturn. I think the father's more interested in it than the child was. So, but yeah, it was pretty fun just to do a little bit of random public outreach, and yeah, should be fun once I get the observatory going. Because even already, like if I'm up there just messing around with it and I have the roof off, like I've told people that, oh yeah, if you see the roof off, just come on up. But I'm not running any gear in there yet. But then people are just kind of wandering up if they see the roof open, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun once I get it running.
Yeah, that's great.
Sort of like a little bit of a landmark here now. And everybody walks by, if they don't know what it is already, they're like, why does the roof come off your shed?
Yeah, sort of seems like a thing you don't want.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I tell them it's for nude sunbathing, so I don't offend the neighbors. But
oh yeah,
and they don't know me well enough yet to know that's a joke, and you can see like the look on their face. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Good stuff. Oh, I'm going to Toronto. Speaking of trips.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm gonna go out and see our friend Randall Rosenfeld and do some astronomy out there with him, and see Rudy's Telescope Museum and the David Dunlop Observatory, and do a bit of a tour of the a bit of a walking tour, astronomy walking tour of Toronto. Going to meet up with some other friends too. It's only for a few days, so I don't have that much time, and I think it's already pretty full up. So Tom Otvas, I've been chatting with. I think we're gonna meet up and try to do at least one or two things. But yeah, so there's a telescope museum. It's not open to the public yet in Toronto, and it was funded by Rudolf Dorner, who's a friend of mine who passed away a few years back, and his other friends were bequeathed an amount or an ongoing stipend to actually run a telescope museum sort of with his name on it. And they've been working towards that under the RASC banner. So I'm not sure when it opens, but I'll get the lowdown next month. Maybe I'll even do some recordings while I'm there, but there's quite a bit of gear there. I don't know what I can say about it, though, to be honest. I feel like I know a fair bit about it because knowing these friends of mine that are involved, and they're going to take me on this tour of it. But I don't know what the story is on whether I can say some of the stuff that I know that's there or not. But I think it's going to be an interesting attraction for people. But I'll get the lowdown, and maybe we can do something on that telescope museum in a further show.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about it. It really interests me a lot. I have a bit of a fascination with vintage telescopes, so I'm very curious what's there.
Yeah, there's all sorts. When I would go over to Rudy's house when he lived in Kitchener, and I also lived in the area, he had like a whole room, like a whole wing in his house just full of telescopes, and they were really interesting scopes and binoculars, like the Calla fluorite binoculars, like those Promenaire ones. We'd go observing with those. What are they called? The not the Schmidt Newtonians, but the Maksutov Newts, or whatever they're called. It's, for some reason, the name is escaping me at the time. Mac Newts. And then I had a variety of other instruments like the Takahashi FS128, which we spent several nights comparing to my Pentax 125 SD. All kinds of different scopes. That's just sort of some of the highlights. And then he actually gifted me a tripod and some other stuff and books and that sort of thing before I left. Really nice person anyway. And so now people are donating their telescopes and other things to the museum. So they're getting it set up and ready to roll. So, but Randall, who's helping run it, or is the director, something fell and like squished his finger. So I think it slowed down things a little bit. So,
Oh no.
yeah, a C14 counterweight.
Gee, yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Maybe we'll get on to what people can see in the night sky for the observer's calendar for October of 2023. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect.
Tonight, if it was clear, this doesn't go out until tomorrow, but it's not very clear anywhere. I was looking at the map. There's a couple spots that might be clear tonight, but the moon and Jupiter are going to be really close together, only a few degrees apart in the night sky tonight. But here, Shane, we're under rain, so
nothing for us to look at. But
nothing for us. But tomorrow, when we release this, October 2nd, Moon and Pleiades, the moon is going to meet up with the Pleiades. And that's one of the brightest star clusters in the Messier catalog anyway, if not the entire night sky. And that would make a nice binocular target. And if you don't know where the Pleiades is, it'll be nice for you to have the moon point out exactly where the Pleiades is by simply just pointing your binoculars at the moon on the night of October 2nd. And then right beside it, you're going to see a bunch of stars. And of course, in subsequent nights, the moon will move away, but the Pleiades will stay in the same location in respect to the other stars in the nighttime sky. So you can then know where the Pleiades is located.
Yeah. And take note of the size of the Pleiades versus the size of the moon. It's a neat little thing when those two pair up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. October 6th is the last quarter moon. And this is a great time to take a look at the Apennine Mountains. I think anyway, that's one of the things I like to look at the last quarter.
Yeah, the Apennines are absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite regions on the moon, and definitely enjoy looking at it every chance that I can, because there's just so much rich detail there.
Mm-hmm. And they partially encircle Mare Imbrium. Mm-hmm. And then on the north side of them, you have the crater Plato, and that's one of the most prominent craters on the moon, and it's right at the top of Mare Imbrium. And then along the terminator, which is the division between night and day on the moon, we have lots of craters right at the center of the moon. Some of those include like Herschel, Timaeus, Alphonsus, Zakel. The Straight Wall is down there towards the bottom as well, and then Mare Nubium is on the bottom portion. But yeah, I didn't know if there was anything on the last quarter that was of interest to you as well, Shane.
No, that's a great list there, Chris. But yeah, the Apennines are what I would be looking at for sure.
Yeah, I just kind of called up a chart and was looking at it because I was like, this is one of my favorite parts of the moon, favorite times to observe it. So yeah, I'm hoping to get my little scope out that night and take a peek at some of this stuff.
Yeah, awesome.
October 10th, before sunrise, we have Venus, the moon, and Regulus. And I did put a little bit of a chart here. I'm just trying to get it in the right spot in the notes. I don't know why it's all moved around, but that's fine. It's going to look like something. In the morning of October 12th, if you get up pretty early, I think I set this for about 5 or 5:30 in the morning, you're going to have very, very bright Venus, which is just about at greatest elongation in the morning sky. Just above and to the left or to the northeast, you're going to have Regulus. And then again, just above and to the left or east, you're going to have the moon to the northeast. And that is going to be a really neat thing. In the show notes here, I put the constellation of Leo, which is where this is all taking place. And the way it's hanging around sort of that end of Leo, it almost is like a reflection of that tail of Leo, sort of in an odd way or something. But I think that's going to be a really cool thing for people just to look at, even with your eye. I don't think you need to use optics or anything.
Yeah. Optics, I don't think really will enhance that too much. The beauty is taking all of that in, which is like a big part of the sky. So for sure, just using your eyes would be, I don't think you can beat it.
Sorry, if you hear me gasping, a deer is eating my lawn about 30 feet in front of me, and he's now staring at me. Sometimes they'll come up and stick their head, and he's walking up. Here he comes. Now he's about 15 feet away from me, and just moseying along. Eat the weeds, don't eat the shrubs. All right. there's another one down below. But yeah, it's funny when the deer just come moseying along. Haven't seen them in a long time, and now they're back. Of course, usually they're closer to my car when it's in motion. All right. October 14th, we have this annular solar eclipse. I put this in the show notes. The path runs along from Texas through Oregon. And I think there's a spot down in Texas where you can watch this annular eclipse, which, of course, as we mentioned at the start, is a ring of fire eclipse, meaning that you never can look at this eclipse without solar safety glasses or specialized solar filters, because the moon is not going to be large enough in the nighttime sky or in the daytime sky to actually cover up all of the disk of the sun. So you need to be aware that that's what's happening there. When I attended Alan Dyer's talk, he identified the place. I can't remember where it is, but people can Google it, I'm sure. If you go to AmazingSky.net, Alan has a whole set of books on how to best observe and photograph these eclipses. I might as well spell his name right. I think I spelled his name horribly in this. Anyway, April 8th, 2024 is the total solar eclipse. And of course, with that one, you get a couple minutes of totality where you can look at the moon covering up the sun and then see the solar corona safely, but only for a couple minutes. The rest of the time, again, you will need a solar filter, and you have to be, as Shane noted, on the totality path, which runs from Atlantic Canada down through the country of Mexico. But yeah, for this one here in October 14th, in Saskatchewan, I think I read that the greatest portion of the partial eclipse occurs just after 9 o'clock in the morning. It looks like 50% ish here, where I'm at. Anyway, if you went to the very, very southwestern corner of our province down by the Old Man on His Back site that we've been to, Shane, you would get a 60% partial eclipse. But in my opinion, not worth making the drive for a 10% difference in your partial eclipse experience, unless you're really into that sort of thing or want some sort of special photograph. I'm going to wait maybe and try to take a look at the total eclipse when it comes about in April.
Yeah, kind of an interesting thing to take note of that day. If you have clear skies and you're around for that partial eclipse, just see if you can, like, without even looking at the sun, just going about in your day, see if you can notice it being any dimmer out. Probably at 50%, I'm guessing nobody will even know it's really happening.
No, you're right. By no, I mean you're right. You won't notice it, I don't think. You'd have to be pretty observant. And then I found that in the other partials that I've observed, it really needs to get to like 70%. And in those eclipses, in fact, you don't really notice that much of a dimming. But what you do notice is that I notice more so the heat from the sun is lost. So you might start noticing less heat coming from the sun, especially at October, where if it is a nice, clear, sunny day, maybe it's only 12 or 13 degrees, you might actually notice that it drops a couple degrees, and you might actually, like, with your hand held up. But when you're looking at it, you absolutely need to be wearing your solar safety glasses or have specialized solar filters. You cannot look at it with your unaided eye, or you will very likely incur eye damage. We don't want anybody doing that.
No, for sure.
October 18th, Antares will be occulted by the moon for most of the European Union. So check your local times there. I tried to find out like specific times. I think maybe even the UK gets some of this, but it was really, I don't know why it was why it was so difficult to find that. I thought, I'll just Google it. I was Googling around. I just couldn't find it very easily, but probably in your locales, or if you're in Britain, probably Sky at Night, or if you're in the European Union, you probably have some other resources available to you, or just run it in your astronomical software. October 19th, 20th, we have a double shadow transit on Jupiter. This one is looking like a pretty good one. For us, it occurs at 1 a.m. our time, which is 3 a.m. Eastern. And new Patreon support renewer, Jim, sent us some details on the event. Shane, do you want to, just not very long, do you mind taking a read of this?
Yeah, for sure. He says, "Hi, Chris and Shane. I noticed an opportunity in October that may interest you and your listeners. I see that the shadow of both Io and Ganymede should be visible on Jupiter from 5:57 to 7:41 Universal Time on Friday, October 20th. Io will also be transiting Jupiter during most of this period. It will be especially well placed here in the Pacific time zone from about 10 p.m. until 11:30 p.m. local time on Thursday, October 19th, when Jupiter will be up around 40 degrees. I'm hoping to observe it in my 115 millimeter refractor and capture an image if the seeing cooperates. Thanks for your tribute to Blake Nancaro and all of his contributions. It inspires me to expand my targets to include double star observations. Jim." Thanks for the email, Jim. Good to know about the events on Jupiter, and definitely get into double stars. They're awesome. They're a lot of fun to observe.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And thanks for the Patreon support as well. We always appreciate it. The double transit lasts about an hour or so, and it'll be on the meridian for us anyway here in Saskatchewan, which is on Mountain Daylight Time, MTT. At that point, we are looking at meridian transit of 1:40 a.m. That's 3:40 a.m. Eastern Time. This is worth getting up for. So I'm going to set my alarm, set up the scope, and get up on the morning of the for us, it will be the very early morning of the 20th. And you might need to watch for it. So if it's just coming on to the limb for you, and run it in your astronomy software, but if it's just coming on to the limb for you, it can be difficult to notice because the limb events of Jupiter are more difficult to see, more difficult to focus. So I sort of put down the sort of midline point, at least for us anyway, is around that 1:40 a.m. mark. So for me, I'm not going to get up, and I'm not going to do a timing of the transit or anything. Also, I want to see the planets or the moons go in front of Jupiter. So I think that occurs later on.
Mm-hmm.
If people get up and they're observing that, once they're done observing that event, they should, if they're in a dark sky site, they should take a look for the zodiacal light. Remember the zodiacal light the finding from a couple of years back?
Yeah. And we just talked about it on a recent episode. I can't remember if that was the September objects or what.
I think it was. Yeah. And I think what's the story that it's part of the atmosphere and material coming off of Mars and being swept back by the solar wind, which is generating a lot of this interplanetary dust in our own solar system. Of course, as it goes out into the area between the planets, the sun strikes it, and then we have to be at a certain angle. This angle is coming up in the early morning hours again, and it forms like this very tall, narrow pyramid in the ecliptic in our morning sky. So if you look to the east, you're going to see Venus there, and this pyramid of light will kind of be cutting through Venus in the morning sky.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Speaking of Venus, on October 23rd in the morning sky, Venus will be at the greatest elongation west, 46 degrees from the sun. I've been taking a look at it. I was looking at it the other morning just with my binoculars, and it's very bright, and it's an excellent time to observe Venus. It's getting very high in the morning sky. I'm not sure what time it rises, but it is well visible when you get up, a few hours before sunrise, and you can take a look at it. It's going to be at about this half phase-ish, which is one of the best times to observe Venus because we got a very large disk to look at. Even in the binoculars, you can see this massively brilliant disk. And there's some things to look for. One is the Schroeder effect. Not sure if you remember the Schroeder effect, Shane.
No, I don't actually. It's escaping me.
So the Schroeder has nothing to do with the Charlie Brown. I think wasn't there Schroeder on Charlie Brown, but anyway. So this is what happens at what's called dichotomy, or when the planet Venus, or Mercury, I guess, goes through dichotomy as well, is at basically a nice right angle triangle with the sun and Earth, and this makes half of the planet appear illuminated for us. Now, what happens though is, and that's going to occur essentially on or about the 23rd. But you likely won't see Venus as totally half illuminated. It will appear either slightly more than half illuminated, or in my experience, slightly less than a half illuminated disk of Venus. And in my experience, what I end up seeing is those polar regions almost look like they have little polar caps that extend way out. And then as the terminator comes in, it comes in a little bit further than the halfway point. And then it forms like this perfectly straight line cutting down, which is kind of like, in a way, like the opposite of what happens on our moon, where on our moon, you can get this like perfectly sort of half illuminated disk all the way from pole to pole. But it's a different effect on Venus. They're starting to get a handle on why it has something to do with the exact angle that we're on, as well as the various levels of the clouds and the reflectivity of the clouds and its effect on our eyes and other things of that sort. But it definitely is something to take a look for. And people can Google the Schroeder effect. And as well, if we're putting these notes up, I did put a couple links to some academic papers that if people are really interested, they can go read.
Right on. Yeah, we'll definitely post this to our website, actualastronomy.com.
The other event the other phenomena to try to take a look for, this one is much more subtle in my experience anyway, is the business of the Ashen Light. I'm not sure if you remember what this is about or not.
No, this is another one. I know I've never seen it.
Okay. So what this Ashen Light is it's kind of like what Earthshine is to the moon, where when the moon is not full and it's just like a little crescent, you may see the unlit portion of the moon. You can still actually see that in the sky. Now with Venus, we can sometimes see something similar, which is the unlit portion of Venus, whereas it's only half illuminated. Like with the moon, if it was half illuminated and you looked at it, even just with your unaided eye or binoculars or telescope, you would actually see that other portion. Well, Venus, in my experience, it feels like a real thing to me, at least insofar that I feel like I can continue that circle around. And when I do a sketch of Venus, I will not draw a crescent. Typically, I will draw the full circle. And I think what's actually happening is that the light is just bouncing around in the clouds. You know, when we have sunset here on a really cloudy day or a reasonably cloudy day, when the sun goes down, we can still see that light in the clouds. You've seen this, right, Shane?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it just makes sense that something similar is happening on Venus. Maybe a little bit different because the clouds have a different composition. They're these beautiful sulfuric acid clouds. If you think that's beautiful, I do. And the light is just kind of reflecting around a little bit different in the atmosphere, allowing us to see the circle now. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just psychological, and because we know it's round, or we're used to looking at the moon when it's in these phases, maybe our minds are just projecting a complete circle. But to me, I really feel like it seems much more than that. It seems about as easy as it is to see the moon Earthshine. If you have some like thin haze or something going over it, you definitely know it's there, and you can see it or sense it. It's the same sort of thing with Venus. Pretty cool to take a look at.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
A really simple thing, if you want a really simple exercise, because Venus is in the morning sky and it's very far, it's almost 50 degrees away from the sun. You want to do this when it's very far away from the sun. You want to make sure you have a hill or a house or something in between you and where the sun is going to rise, which is fairly easy to do. You can actually continue to follow Venus into the daytime sky. That's one for Mike, because he was following Venus in the daytime sky before the sunset, back when it was on the other side of the solar system here back in the spring. This time you can watch Venus in the morning, and then like I said, put something between you and the sun. You don't want to be looking anywhere near the sun, of course, because of the risk of eye damage, but you want to watch that Venus sort of continuing to climb into the blue sky. So you'll have quite a few days to do that.
Yeah, cool. Are you going to give it a try?
Maybe. Yeah, we'll see. I've actually done that several times. So yeah, it's worth doing. And typically what I'm doing is not doing it unaided eye, but doing it with the telescope. And I found that what can happen is if you're observing Venus and you're able to detect some of the subtle cloud features, as you watch it come into the daytime sky and as that sky brightens, it causes changes in your eye, which can improve the contrast for different features that you're seeing on Venus. So some of the things that I look for are the fact that the poles can appear brighter, and that there can be strands of darker material towards the middle of the planet or into the equatorial region, and then even extending from like the terminator across to the to the other side of the planet. So you can actually see some of these subtle cloud features, and I find they're always best just at the point where either the sun has set or the sun is about to rise. So right at that's sort of like there's like sort of like that magical hour, they say for the photographers, like that magic hour here on Earth. We have the same thing with Venus, where there's sort of like a magical hour there where the contrast is just right. Everybody's a little bit different, so you can play around with that too, but that's telescopic stuff though.
Yeah, cool.
Evening of the 23rd, Saturn gets within 3 degrees of the moon for some, but I think it's like Hawaii and Japan. I don't think we get to see them that close. We will in future months. October 28th, we have the full moon and a partial lunar eclipse, but not for us. Favors the UK, EU, Africa, India, Asia, etc. And then also on the 28th, Jupiter will be 3 degrees south of the moon. And a couple nights later, again, it will visit the Pleiades. But these are not well placed for those of us in North America. So check your local times or software, and that'll help you out.
Mm-hmm.
No bright comets this month, not that I could see. Did you note any bright comets coming up? I couldn't find any.
Yeah, nothing's really out there right now that is gaining much interest because, yeah, it's pretty dim. There's a number of dimmer comets that you would require, a dark sky and a telescope, but certainly nothing that would be binocular or naked eye.
Yeah, I think there's a couple that are like 9.9 and 10.1, and one that might brighten to 11. I was like, no, this is. But the Skyhound Comet Chasing website has launched a YouTube channel. I think we mentioned that maybe in August or maybe the September episode.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And so I had written Greg, who runs it, and had said how much I enjoyed his site. We actually use it for the podcast. Because I kind of wanted to make sure, like, he knew, like, we do use that as one of our references. And I sent him along a sketch of Comet Nishimura that I did. And he made up a YouTube video for the Comet Nishimura in September and featured my sketch and my observation in that. So I thought that was pretty
neat.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of neat. Really fun. So yeah, people should check out the Skyhound Comet Chasing YouTube channel. I think it's just called Comet Chasing. Like, it is just Comet Chasing on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube or even go to search engine type Comet Chasing YouTube, it's going to take you right to that site.
Right on.
Yeah. Any double stars or anything? I think you talked about some double stars earlier on in your observations, but anything that you can recommend for people to look at?
Yeah, maybe. So I mentioned those two at the start. The other three that I looked at, I won't really get into much of the detail, but they're in Andromeda. The SAO designations would be 54032. Pretty easy split. There's a big magnitude difference. Like, I think one's magnitude 4 and the companion is around 7-ish. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of some color variations. The color variation here is a little bit more subtle. The primary is white and the secondary has a little bit of blue in it. So, it'll test your optics a little bit to see if you can pull out some of those color differences. Mm-hmm. Next one is 55107. This is a very wide pair, and I looked at it through my 76 millimeter, but I also grabbed my 12 by 36 Canon stabilized binoculars, and it's visible through those. So it's a binocular double, which not all are. So that's kind of a neat aspect of this one. And again, there's some really neat color variation here. The primary is an orange star, and then the other one is sort of a whitish blue star. And then the last one is 55330. It's a tighter pair than the last two that I mentioned, but they're fairly similar magnitudes. And again, a little bit of color within the system. One star is white, and then the other one has at least to my eye, I was picking up a little bit of blue. So there's a few doubles for people to hunt down, and like very, very modest apertures will split this. You certainly don't need a monster of a telescope for these ones. I easily split them all with my 76 millimeter.
Nice. Any observing plans for the month of October, Shane?
Well, I'm hoping we have good weather for new moon coming up here. So if we do, I'm going to venture down to my uncle's farm, which is a fairly dark location. And he's had a desire to look through my telescopes, and I've had a desire to just check out the night skies from that location. So we'll see how things shape up, Chris. But, outside of new moon, if it's clear out in the evenings, I'll probably be out looking at some double stars in the backyard, because this is, again, my favorite time of the year. You can get out in the early evening. I can put the telescope away before bedtime and, function quite well the next day at work. So
nice.
I want to observe as much as I possibly can. How about you?
I'm going to look at Stefan's quintet in honor of all the furry friends I have around me, which are the deer, and that's otherwise known as the Deer Lick group, because my deer are back, which some people may think is great, which I do not think is so great, because there's a lot. And last spring, when I started coming out here to observe, when it was still cold before we opened our place up, there was 18 deer on our little property here. This is not a big chunk of land. And to have 18 deer that like to hang out and wander around between myself and 3 or 4 neighbors' properties is it's a bit much to try to be observing when there's that many deer around. So yeah, well, I'm going to try to take a look at the Deer Lick group. That's what I informally refer to all these deer as, that like to wander around while we're here. I mean, it's noon. It's the middle of the day. It's not like it's at dawn or dusk or anything, or there's nobody around. Like, I'm sitting here with the door open, doing my recording. They can clearly hear me, and the deer are wandering by within 15 feet of where I'm sitting during this entire episode. It's like being in a zoo, but for I'm the one inside the cage, and they're just wandering around me.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. It's just constant deer here. It's just wild. Cool. All right. Well, with that, Shane, we'll let you go, and thank listeners for listening. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and share our show. Share this with the friends. Shane, I just do this for fun, and we always enjoy getting your observing notes, your show ideas, and such to actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.